Welcome, photographers and Inner Circle members, online vault members, to our photography program for this month. Today we are talking indeed photography techniques in great detail, and today what we are covering is a subject called seeing the light, the magic of ambient light and how to use it to create perfect portraits. Now, the reason we put perfect in quotes is because we all know that there's no such thing as a perfect portrait. It could always be better, and it's all subjective anyway. But before we jump into all of that, we are joined, of course, today by my father, Charles Lewis. Hello, Dad.
Hello, Todd. Hello, Tom. And hello, members.
All right, and of course we are joined by Tom Morelli, who came up with our subject and the title of our subject for this issue, Seeing the Light. Hello, Tom.
Hi, guys. By the way, the light on you is perfect. Hold still. I just wanted to come in. Never mind. I'll do that later. Yeah, I got some new equipment. I have to have my new equipment nearby just to look at on the break. But great to be here.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Tom. And thanks for coming up with this idea for what we're going to be covering today, because each issue we do, or each month, we want to do a little bit on some photography techniques as well as on the business techniques, which is what we really devote the majority of our energy to. But we don't want to forget that we are also professional photographers. We want to always be increasing our level of quality, especially when it comes to creating images that will appeal to our target market. Dad, anything that you want to say before we jump in here with some key points and then start looking at a whole bunch of photographs about the importance of ambient light and being able to find that perfect light in a location where Mother Nature has more control over it than you do?
Well, yeah, it's extremely important because the light is what creates the image, as all of you know, and if the light is not correct, it will not help the subject look their very best. And that is their dominant buying motive most of the time, is to look their very best in these images. So we have to pay very close attention to the light. And with ambient light, a lot of times it's not right, and no matter how you look, find it. And Tom's going to show you exactly how it isn't right. So then we have to bring in some gobos, some big black things, and hold back some light, subtract some light from above the head. You have to do all that stuff. But today, he's showing you how to do it primarily all natural, without having to bring anything else in, except a little bit on flash, a little here and there, but not much. So this is going to be very good and very helpful for our members.
You bet. And that's what it really is about, is starting with the best of what we have to work with already. And then enhancing it as we need to in camera first, enhancing it in Photoshop as a last resort later. But we always want to do our very best to get the best light right out of the gate, with Mother Nature providing it, both when we're working outdoors and sometimes when we're working indoors. Today, I think, Tom, we're focusing primarily on outdoors, right?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, let's dive right in here. So first of all, you should be asking that question of why listen to us about this. The first thing I will say is, don't listen to me about this. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know a lot about this particular subject except for how it applies to cinematography outdoors, which is very similar. So a lot of the techniques will be very similar, but boy, you're going to really be listening to the guy right below me here. That's the one to really be paying the majority of. Yep. Hello there. Why does this feel like the beginning of the Brady Bunch? I don't know. That's the guy you're really going to be listening to there, and the gentleman below him has practiced these techniques and utilized them throughout his career as well. So, Tom, why don't you talk for just a little bit about your background and why people should listen to you when it comes to this subject?
One of the fun things about what we're going to talk about today, and I've been doing this in my business for 42 years almost this year, is after a while, if you get good at seeing the light, the title of this program, it's kind of fun. You'll be in a restaurant, there'll be an overhanging lamp, and the person you're eating with, you like tip your head a little. Or if you're out at a party, you're out under some trees, you're on a porch at someone's house, all of a sudden it becomes innate what we're going to talk about. And so it's actually not that hard once you know what you're doing and what you're looking for, which is what we'll talk about today. But it's really helped make my business what it is, because people do want to look good, as Chuck said, and we want flattering light, we want soft directional light. A lot of photographers I talk to today, they're just starting out, don't know how to use reflectors or off-camera flashes and gobos. So they just walk outside and say, well, I got some light, let's use this. But unfortunately, if you pick the wrong spot, it's very unflattering to your subject and therefore unflattering to your bottom line. So today we're going to talk about helping that out and hopefully making people invest more in your portraits because they love them so much.
Yes, having flattering portraits and a flattering bottom line. I like that. There's no better way to jump into this particular subject today. Absolutely. So that's kind of why listen to us, and in particular, Mr. Morelli, who, incidentally, all the photographs we will be looking at today are photographs from Tom Morelli. He supplied these ahead of time, including photographs kind of showing the locations before taking the portrait, so you can kind of see what he's working with today. So we already kind of talked about why today's subject is so important, why it's so vital to your work. Remember, as a photographer, you're painting with light. Light is your brush. It is your paints. It's everything when it comes to photography, because without it, you just have a big black square, which, you know, in some museums that might be presented as art. I don't know, but we're being a little bit more particular and specific with our art, shall we say, and we want to make sure we can see the subject and see them in a very flattering way. All right, so with that, let's jump right in here, Tom, and let's start out with our first part here, which is when scouting locations, you're going to be seeking an overhang and at a time of day when the sun won't be hitting where the subject will be. One of our, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom and Dad, but one of our greatest enemies is direct light, direct sunlight. Boy, in cinematography, it's just as bad. We're trying to avoid that at all costs because it just it makes it really, really hard to create a flattering image and to balance the light well throughout that entire image. So, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about this first particular subject here.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. You know, today is kind of two major categories. One is man-made light blocking to help us find that great light, and the other will be nature, which we'll get into in a different section. So a lot of times we go to clients' homes, and what looks like a spot that would be a terrible spot to do a portrait, if it has an overhang and I can use a longer lens to soften the background and other techniques, I'll go, you know, at a certain time of day, that could be a great spot. This is why the go-see is so important to clients' homes. So you can check out the time of day and see if there's a spot where you'll be working that has overhangs, whether they're man-made or natural. So often I go to high school seniors' homes, and they have garages and other spots that the client or the prospect goes, oh, that would look terrible. And they're really surprised when they see what we can do, because we're looking for an area where the sun is not hitting directly, because you get contrast and squints and all those things that you don't want to have in a photograph. So I'm looking for natural overhangs on buildings that will block the light from overhead. And Chuck had mentioned that there are artificial ways to do that with light stands. But if we're traveling light, there are natural or man-made ones that will work well. This garage was a good example. The garage itself, unpainted, old, doesn't look very good. But with that overhang and with the right time of day, it made for a great opportunity to do some portraits. And I don't know if you want to go to show us an example of that. This young man, light coming from the back, it was an overcast day, because we're kind of talking with ambient light. You really have two situations, sunny days and overcast days. Both have their pluses and minuses, which we'll talk a bit about. But on those days where it's overcast, this gentle light was coming in, sort of like a hair light or a kicker light coming in from the back. And he was facing toward a little more open sky toward me. So this is such a good subject, it breaks into different categories, with camera off camera flash and without. Most of these are without, although as you'll see later, there are some with. So the overhang blocks that light from overhead. We get enough light coming in the eyes to create sparkle and catch lights, and just turn that into a surprise. And this ended up being a yearbook portrait for the high school senior. They boys particularly really like this. And in this case, you can see the sun's behind the building, that lighter area. The overcast was probably light was burning through. We have those semi-foggy days here in Maine. Sometimes I'm in a semi-fog, but that's different. And so but never have the sun striking where you're going to stand at. So this particular location, for example, would not be good at several different times a day where the sun's hitting it. Only later in the day where the light is behind it. Chuck, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
No, I'm very strong about the eyes of our subjects. They're sensitive to bright light. So one of the main things, not only is it ugly lighting with the sun hitting them in the face or anything, but if there's too much light around, they'll squint a little bit. It's just normal. And then they don't have that pop, that beautiful personality that we want to see. So I totally am on board with this overhang thing and anything to get away from direct sunlight, because it can get not only unattractive, but also it can really cause them to start to squint just a little bit, and they'll notice it right away in the portraits.
And that's one of the challenges too, as you know, as a portrait photographer, when someone is smiling versus, say, this young man who's we call pleasant but non-smiling, although sometimes the senior boys want to look kind of tough. Smiling can cause squinting with or without the sun. If you add in the sun, then you really got some challenges going. In this case, the light's kind of bouncing around. There's natural reflectors, the white of the paint. There's some gravel in front of this building that reflects white light back up into the eyes. So the lighting isn't necessarily traditional lighting, but it's still lighting his face well enough that we get some sparkle in the eyes. And again, longer lens makes the building look okay, although a lot of people like that kind of grunge look, peeling paint, stone, things like that. So this is a real useful type of spot, any type of place at your client's home, or if you have a studio and has a building you can use like this. That overhang works. In this case, the sun definitely was out behind the building, bouncing off all around off that. Different time of day, same building, and turning this young lady in a different direction, in a different spot, because the sun was to the other side of the building. But again, using blockers and the building as a bit of a posing aid, so you have foreground, midground, and background with a longer lens. Showing your clients during your consultations and have them go, I like that, really helps. So you're not just wandering around to buildings, but they see examples of that. So this is usually more a boy's pose, but that young lady really liked this type of look and really wanted to have this. So that's what we ended up doing. And all these anything you're seeing today ended up as portraits, either wall portraits or in yearbooks or in some other place in the client's home. So they're all ones that they really loved.
All right. So next up here, we're talking about buildings such as gardening sheds, wood fences, things like that. Often are good to lean subjects against. Why can they be such good reasons for that, or uses for those things, for leaning people against?
Yeah, well, first of all, they often are in and around clients' homes or location settings. So they're easy to find usually, especially, again, if you do the go-see. They usually have texture. Usually they're graying or weathered, so they have a neutral quality, so that many different tones of tops or outfits they're wearing will go with it, so it's not distracting. There's not a bunch of stuff going on unless somebody has painted something or something. They really want that to show. But these are pretty normal, especially here in Maine. We have people who have gardening sheds, fences, things like that. So they're also, the leaning part of it is it gets them usually sitting on the ground, leaning against a wood post or a wood fence or a shed. It's flattering because they're looking up. So that angle is a little bit above camera angle. And that lean gives a little more dynamic rather than just sitting straight. They're kind of doing that little bit of a lean that we want. So there's more dynamic feeling to the photograph. So if you look around, they're great. The only thing is, as you can see with this particular example, the shade has just started. So that would not be a good place to set somebody. But later in the day, by golly, there is light coming in our case, viewer right, her left, that just goes on the face beautifully. And this is at their home, and this is like a gardening shed. So when I did the go-see, we picked a time of day that would work, because earlier in the day, the sun would just be striking that, and it would be obviously unusable. So this ended up as I think it's an 18 by 30 or 18 by 20, something like that, wall portrait in their home. They loved it. I photographed her brother since and their family twice, and they're great clients. But that light is being blocked. In that case, the shed has an overhang. Sometimes a fence obviously does not have an overhang, but it will have later in the day that light blocking capability. Many times fences are at the edge of properties as well, so you'll see a tree overhang, more of a natural that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But just looking for those small buildings. And again, the client was real impressed. They said, I never would have dreamed that you'd get a portrait. It's out where the kids played in the yard. That was mom's gardening shed, so it meant a lot to them to do this on location.
Now, Tom, I've got a question for you too on that particular image here. Does photographing her, her right side, left for us as we're looking at it, being that close to that darker wood, does that mean that did you have to do anything to kick any extra light into that shadow side of the face, or did that all kind of happen naturally because of the location?
That particular one was natural. There are times I have one of those collapsible reflectors. You open them up and they open up like magic. They fly open. That's a diffuser and a reflector, and that could be a whole program in itself, and maybe we'll do that sometime. But in that case, if I recall, and I photographed a lot of these, but this was available light only. I may or may not in Photoshop have adjusted the shadows just a little bit to open that up, because you can do that without creating an artificial look. But to the best of my recollection, that is straight out of the camera, other than a little bit of retouching and so forth. The light absorbing capability of that actually kind of created a lighting ratio that if I had turned her face a little more away and toward the light would be a little different, which also could be pleasing.
Yeah, I like that. I like that ratio there is very nice. And I wondered how much that darker wood kind of was a factor in that. That's great. How about this next image here?
All right, same idea. This was a wood fence, and I gave it a little, I don't know if they call it a Dutch angle still, but where you tip the camera. So normally if you were OCD, or I have friends that are OCD and I tell them, oh, I'm DOC too. And they say, that's not how you spell it. But anyway, the OCD would be, gee, can we get the line straight up and down on that fence? But I really like that particular angle, so I tipped the camera, obviously, leaned her back against that. The light was coming. That is totally open sky. There's no artificial light there at all, but it was the overhang of, there was a fence there, and there was some overhang going on, and this was actually like a big piece of wood that was real weathered, leaning up against the building, and it was part of fencing that was taken down. But again, scouting out the location, seeing that, the client was like, you want to work back there too? And I'm like, yeah, this is a really beautiful spot. And that ended up being a canvas portrait on their wall. The light is fairly flat, but she has a slim face, a beautifully shaped face, nice jawline, so it worked for her. Some people, that type of lighting wouldn't be as flattering.
So, Tom, I see two beautiful, one in each eye, so two total catch lights that are very pointed in a point. Was there any kind of auxiliary flash or anything, or is this all strictly natural light?
That, to the best of my recollection, that was all strictly light. There's a very small, I won't call it a periscope, but a very small opening of light because there were trees behind me. It was open sky and trees, and it was almost like a peephole of light that kind of comes through the trees to create that, because that's not a flash. I know that for sure. That's artificial light. I did go in and lighten up the irises a bit in Photoshop underneath. So it almost, when I first looked at it, I said, did I pop a reflector in under her chin? But there's no reflector under there. So that, to the best of my recall, is totally, other than any slight Photoshop enhancement, there was no artificial or off-camera flash there.
Great.
Nice. All right. Now, Tom, you might have said this, and I might have missed it. Was this done? So was this done at their home?
Yes.
This was. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're finding, again, what this is about today too is finding these locations, in clients' homes, around their homes.
Right.
Parks, that have structures, that you can go to. We're lucky here in Michigan. We have lots of parks, and there are usually some structures out there. And if you can find them when there's nobody else around them, you can use those, again, at the right time of the day. So the more the locations in your town that you might be able to use for these, and when in the time of day will the light be the best for doing the type of portrait that you want to do with the type of structure that you want to do, the better off you're going to be. And knowing how with the change of seasons that changes as well. That's one of the things we certainly notice here in Michigan big time is right now at the recording of this particular program, it is the fall. We're in autumn, and the sun, rather than being up at up like this on us, is more like this. It's almost always, as it's going across the sky, it's almost like we're getting magic hour throughout the day. Not quite to the level of magic hour, but you get much better light in the autumn. And if you know the position of these buildings that you can potentially be working with as options if the client's home won't work or you don't have a place at your studio, then know how the light is going to affect that as you go throughout the day and throughout the seasons.
And, I didn't have time to put them in this. There's a beautiful walkway built in the city of Brewer where I live. It's about 2 miles long now. It's a $5 million project, and it's along the waterfront, the Penobscot River, which runs between Brewer and Bangor. And this walkway, later in the day, there are some structures they built, both brick and artificial, as well as trees and things. Just gorgeous. And that light is just dips down low enough across the river. It skims in this beautiful late day, gorgeous light comes in. And there are so many places that we do senior portraits and family portraits. A lot of families walk down there, so that's part of their story. So these younger families are like, we go down to the walkway every evening. Let's take the kids down there. So that works out well. There's a lot of people there, so I have to kind of work around them. But anyway, this is another wooden structure just leaned against this one. There is a reflector, to best of my recollection. A little sunlight coming in from overhead, kind of kissing the top of the hair there, and a little reflector put in our lower right. And again, you have to do facial analysis because sometimes certain poses or certain lighting schemes would be great for one person, but not for another. So you have to kind of keep an eye out for that and see what would work. In this case, this is almost fashion lighting, as her face is evenly lit. There's no real lighting ratio there. It's very subtle, but it was very, very flattering. And that ended up as a wall portrait. And actually, they did I think we had 5 or 6 poses of that young lady. They did I think it was a 20 by 30, they call them blocks, where it's the portrait is on canvas mounted, but then there's like 4 blocks on it. It's like a love grouping, but it's 3D. It's really neat. Their parents love that. So
nice, very nice work. All right. Well, then next up, so open sky comes in at an angle as the building has an overhang that blocks the light. So here's another one that's going to be very dependent on the location, time of day, time of year, where that light is coming from. What are we looking at here, Tom?
Yeah, and this is downtown Bangor. A lot of students now and parents like that urban look, or where they live and shop and work down in downtown Bangor in this case. And there's a lot of old buildings there, a lot of really neat architecture. So I've worked down there many times, and often they ask for that, but I've gotten good at knowing exactly what time, what doorway. I have a parent that works at a bank down there, and they said, can we do this at 3 o'clock? And I went there, and the sun was directly in that old doorway. I said, sorry, got to do that in the morning. And she said, oh, my daughter doesn't want to get up that early. But anyway, you have to do that observation before. You don't want to be out with your client looking around that day, scouting out. You want to do this research well beforehand. Take a Sunday ride and look at these buildings and places that might work. So I'm always, again, looking for foreground, midground, and background so that you've got some nice architecture in Bangor. This is an old 1800s bank. Bangor Savings Bank used to be in there, and now it's a different business. But the sun obviously is to our right, way in the background, low in the sky, so it's kind of coming in and skimming across her hair. That is open sky. There is a little bit of fill flash there on her face, just a bit to kind of brighten up the eyes. Didn't need a whole lot, but we didn't want those raccoon dark eyes that come from overhead light, because the overhang here was quite high. It's quite a big building. So we're working again in a shadow area, and it was just a few feet behind her that the sun was starting to sort of come in on the building, so I had to be real judicious about where I placed her. But and this again ended up as a wall portrait in the yearbook, and just a lot of fun working, because these kids are so excited to go down and do this. They feel like fashion models working, finding these locations, and that's what I kind of make the experience like, is to do that. So we're looking for that open sky. And again, what is open sky? We haven't really talked about that. Open sky is an area where the sun isn't. And it might be blue sky, it might be overcast, but it's a soft, light coming from the side and above that the sun is not there. It's behind them or blocked by a building. Open sky is available to have that great light. And then, depending on where you place your subject, that open sky will strike their face and the mask of their face in different ways. And we'll show a couple examples of that coming up.
Yeah, and also, excuse me, Todd. One of my favorite sources of light, I'm always looking for it, is open sky that has some puffy cumulonimbus clouds in a distance or something, and the sun is coming in and hitting those clouds, and then it bounces back down right into their eyes. So it can be a gorgeous source for a key light.
Yep.
Against versus all just solid cloudy or all just solid blue sky. If you get those white clouds in the right place and the sun in the right place, and it's just luck, but keep your eyes open for that, because that gets some beautiful light.
I try to order those on Amazon, and there's they just, and I will walk out with a client. Of course, I always try to be positive. So no matter what it's like, I'm like, oh, the light's great today. But when that light is occurring, just what you said, Chuck, I go, yes, because I know we're going to get some beautiful images. One thing this program is not equipped to do today, just because of lack of time, is the color temperature does change. If it's 4 in the afternoon and this late day orange sun is coming through and illuminating the background versus in the morning where it's a little cooler light perhaps, or midday but it's overcast, we'll talk some other time about, but the custom color balance on your camera can be vital to that, so that your images are accurate in terms of skin tones. And so, on your little, if you're just a beginner, you have the camera that has a little cloudy and sunny and all the little directions on the back of your camera, how to set your color temperature. That's kind of where they got that from, is so you want to have that right time of day. So learn how to, and stick with us, we'll get to that at some point. The custom color temperature on your camera is important depending on the time of day you're working.
So just to make sure that I'm clear on this as well, then, so this particular image that we're looking at here, so this was not a cloudy day then? This was a direct sunlight kind of day, do you recall?
It was a direct sunlight kind of day, but the sun was really kind of kissing the top of some buildings in downtown Bangor, skimming over, so it was semi-blocked. There probably were a few clouds. It wasn't direct overhead sun for sure. And they were just striking the building from behind her, but not that hot. So it wasn't like I had 4 or 5 stops more of a sunshine striking a building than on her face from the open sky. Your camera really isn't designed, and you really don't want to get into that situation later I'll have an example of how what that can look like. Same spot here, and this is a good example. The sun is out, as you can see, way up the street there. And this young lady, her mom worked at this particular building at an ad agency, and she's like, oh, she is a little girl. She used to come, and we'd have lunch together, and I'd pick her up from school. So this kind of meant, she says, everybody here loves her, so she brought this young lady in. So this is kind of a pullback to show where we were. I just did a couple months ago. Most of these are. So this actually shows how, even with a little bit of an overhang, the lighting direction was good if that was cropped properly, but the background's so hot, so I wouldn't normally use this. I kind of wanted to show roughly where we were, knowing that we needed a few pullbacks for this. So once I determined that the light was coming in at a soft open sky angle, I moved her into a little doorway, which was the doorway of where her mom works. And the ambient light sort of wraps around her a little bit. So this one was done with just a little tiny bit of off-camera flash. I think it's the next slide of the same young lady that shows where we put her, but the light was coming exactly from that angle, and that's right about there. And her mom was only a few feet away crying, which is one of my favorite things. And this girl had so many awesome portraits and so many fantastic locations that we used that were meaningful. But this one, in context of this program, wanted to show it's about as simple as it gets, but the light is blocked by the entrance of the doorway, which is her right, our left. So you get a little bit of lighting ratio there. Again, she's pretty fit and trim, so there wasn't a lot of lighting correction concerns that we worried about. I kind of liked how the granite in the stone building had a similar bluish greenish tone to what she had on. So when I saw that, I was like, yes, good choice. So we can work with that.
Yeah, Tom, one of the things you don't ever want to do is take your background for granted.
Aha! You are a rock star.
Ha ha, touche.
Chuck?
I get it. I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Uh,
I love it.
funny.
Well, that's great, and showing that kind of showing the location where you could see the sun in the background. You could see how much sun was hitting the street in the background, and then to see how much control you've got over this light. Again, I think you said you just used a little bit of flash, Phil.
Just a tiny bit, yeah. The lighting ratio between her open sky side and the side facing the doorway that her mom was nearby standing in crying, it probably would have worked too. Especially if it was some sort of profile, if I changed the direction. But in this case, I just put a little bit of fill light in there with a handheld flash, nothing, just a little light softening agent on this flash, and it did the trick for me.
Nice. All right. So using a client's home is obviously something we talk about a lot, and how powerful that is, again, for creating portraits that your target market is going to love, that they're going to appreciate on a whole other level, rather than just creating them in, a camera room or even in a location that might not be as meaningful to them. So let's talk about this a little bit, that oftentimes the client's home will have a porch that can be used to be useful for creating the portraits using, again, primarily ambient light. Why don't you talk about that a bit, Tom?
Yeah, when I do the ghosty, I'm always looking for porches, because a porch obviously is an overhang, and the porch usually, depending on its size, even if it's not a big porch, as long as it's got some sort of covering, you're going to have directional soft light at certain times of day, which you can determine by going there and saying, okay, the sun sets and then rises over there, and you can figure out what time of day it is and check that out. But sometimes the porch is attached to a building that's lighter. That creates kind of a natural reflector, so you don't even need auxiliary lighting. The person can be situated so that they're under the overhang, no overhead light creating raccoon eyes. They're turned toward that light or toward the camera, but the light is lighting their face at an angle that's flattering, and we'll show you how to do that in a second here. And the rest of it can either be fill, reflector, or just bouncing off that natural color of the house. If the house is green or blue or something, obviously you might run into a color temperature reflection problem. Here's another young man standing, leaning. Sun is out bright that day. It was a time of day, it was like, couldn't do it any other time of day. I think he played football. We had to do it in the morning when the sun, and so you can see it's back there now. In a print, I would tone that down a little bit, because that's really hot. In the digital image here, it's a little more pronounced than it would be in a print, to our left, his right. But this was basically available light coming through kind of a doorway behind me, or the entrance to the porch. I did use a little bit of fill flash there to fill in the shadows, because the lighting ratio was a little hot on that. But many times in a porch, you'll have a place that they can lean or sit or recline against, that is really nice for doing posing. Chuck, I don't know if you want to add any porch talk to this.
I love porches. I'm with you all the way there. You want to prevent the light coming down on top of them, and porches do, and especially in a white house like you mentioned, that gives you just a little natural reflection, and you can literally do it with nothing if the background is right, and you get a beautiful 2-to-1, 3-to-1 lighting ratio. I love porches, and of course they have the little railings and stuff that can be used for posing helpers and stuff. I know you do that a lot as well. I agree completely with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice, very nice. And again, Mother Nature doing the majority of the work for you, but you got to know how to work with Mother Nature, not against Mother Nature. That's just a rule for life in general, folks, not just photography. All right, how about this one, Tom?
Don't fool with Mother Nature. Wasn't that a butter ad? So this is a good example. The sun in the back, it's kind of actually coming in at an angle from our viewer left, just a little bouncing around on the background there. But her face is directly toward open sky with an overhang, and I was down on the lawn a little bit, pulled away. And again, a little foreground, background, moved around a couple plants a little bit to dress it up a little. But this is another good example of just walking around going, ooh, that's a sweet spot, making a little note to yourself. We're going to work there, because really, again, if you go do the go see, get out this information, plus all the other information we gather at the consultation, and then the go see, when you show up, you can have fun, make it a great experience. You're not looking around going, I don't know what I'm going to do here. You're prepared. As a professional, if you want to go to the next level in your business, you learn this stuff. And then the person is remarking often in their testimonials, we had a great time. They're not saying, well, it took a while. He was looking around where we should photograph things. So be sure to look ahead and make sure that where you're going is working properly for you and your client that time of day. And that's why, again, porches are great, but you have to do them at the right time of day or else they're not going to be any good to you either.
Yeah, and I just want to comment, Tom, because, you do this every day. We hardly think about it when you do it every day. But look at, he mentioned the placement, a little placement change of a couple of plants. Look how nicely that's done, with the one in the background over her right shoulder, and then the little red flowers down by her hand, and then just the little touching of the green. That is a beautiful portrait, Tom. Very nicely done.
Thanks.
Gorgeous expression, beautiful lighting. Love it.
And your clients call because they see this work on display, or your prospects call.
That's right.
And when they become your clients, they expect consistency. They expect to get similar, if not better, results. And I jokingly sometimes will say to seniors, all my friends came here. I go, your friends aren't going to like it at all because yours is the best session I've done this year. And they'll laugh, And I'll say, I'm just kidding. I tried the same for everybody. But you really want to make them feel like you knocked yourself out doing the best job you could, like you did for their friend 3 years ago, because people do talk, and you don't want them to say, well, yours came out a lot better than mine. So you got to make sure that you're doing that for every person that you work with.
All right, Tom, how about this photograph right here? Again, utilizing a porch. You got that kind of fence or railing kind of that my dad was talking about. What are we looking at here?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. You can see off to our right is where the open sky is. Way in back beyond those trees, there's a hot spot where the sun hit. Again, I would tone that down in a print. Then this young lady, it's this is a little off the subject, but posing is often a function of what people normally would do anyway. You see people standing around doing things like this. We don't just make that up. We emulate that because they do that. So she sat down. She goes, okay, what do you want me to do? And I said, nothing. Stay right there. Click, and that's on their wall. And so it's retain that natural light can help the natural look as people feel comfortable. Whereas in a studio on a posing stool, they may not feel as comfortable. And so as you're doing things, they feel stiff. When you're outside and working in their home, it really does lend to them being more natural feeling. And often with fences like that, they'll lean on them. We'll do that. What pose is that? Number 3? No. This pose.
Yeah, pose number 3.
All of a sudden, my mind
pose
went
number 4.
Yeah, and so they'll do that on the. I've still got my posing wheel from Chuck Lewis. I do. It's over there on the wall, and so the posing aids that are around there, often you can create a series. I mean, if somebody just said you got one spot, and I'm like, well, give me that porch. I can do 20 different beautiful images on that porch. Right. Some that show more of the porch, some that don't show any of the porch, but it's just sort of a natural little photography studio on location with very minimal off-camera flash or reflector, or none at all if you really know what you're looking for. And there's been some cases over the years where my equipment failed, and I had a camera and I had open sky, and that was it. And maybe a reflector, but my flash, whatever, even broke or whatever. You start to think about, okay, what's the best light? And if you really start seeing that and looking for it, you could really, not that I would recommend it, but you can do a whole session with just available light and have it be very successful if you know what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And now I've got a question about this one, Tom. So this one here, you obviously this was a direct sunlight day. You can kind of tell it from the far distant background or almost middle ground, but it's kind of between the middle ground and the background there, with the light that's hitting the foliage back there. But boy, I feel like if that foreground or if that middle ground greenery that's right behind her had not been there, that would have been too large of a distracting light area there, wouldn't it? I mean, so that was part of your choosing, I'm guessing, where on this porch to position her. Is that correct?
Right. You've got a mix there between the man-made overhang of the porch And the artificial, although they planted those, so they're sort of man-made, but the plants in the background, the big bushes and things, are definitely there. In this case, blocking the light. If those weren't there, I would not have used this spot at all. I definitely couldn't have worked there because the sun, at least that time of day, would have been coming a little too hot through and probably hitting the porch and her back and so forth, or at least the reflection of the sun coming off those trees in the background. So yeah, it would have just been too distracting.
Right, absolutely. And right now, I think you're right at that line where, if there had been just a touch more of that yellow bright bush or whatever behind her, then our eyes would have gone to that instead of her face. But right now, as soon as I look at this, at least my eyes immediately go to her face and aren't distracted by that bit of yellow that's behind her, largely because of the rest of the stuff that's in that middle ground there. Nice. All right. Well, let's take a look at the next one here.
Yeah, and the same idea, the longer lens gives you that nice bokeh in the background, those little round circles that are out of focus that make your eye go toward her. This, if I recall correctly, is just totally available light with light bouncing off the building. I don't believe there was a flash or reflector here. She was seated against a railing, but then leaned back against it. So I really like the look of the tip of her head against that particular area. That one I gave a slight white vignette. And you have to be careful. That may be a little over vignetted because you don't want to get a keyhole effect. That was a few years ago, so I was just learning. No, that was not that long ago, but I thought I'd make an excuse. But they really liked it, and their home, they liked white frames. Their furniture was all white, so it really, that light, airy feeling was what I was going for, and that really fit well within their homes. I photographed her and her sister and then her family, and their dad owns quite a large car dealership, and the family one is in their dealership in his office in an adequate size and a matching one at home. So they've continue to been some really good clients of mine and have sent me a lot of business over the years. And really, they just love their daughters right to pieces, as they should. And so they've been really good for referring other people, and people go into that dealership and see that. And of course, there's my signature. But anyway, back to the porch. Yes, it all started there. She was the first one.
Now, Tom, this is another one of those great examples of just taste, and, you had said that maybe you felt like it was a little over vignetted. I don't feel that at all. I look at that. I think that's just the right amount of vignette. But see, I'm a big fan of vignette because I think that's one of the things that really separates fine portraiture from what everyone's used to doing with their cell phones or their smartphones. And if they do apply a vignette, it tends to be a very, very bad vignette kind of a filter or something that just,
right.
When it's done right. And to me, that almost could be looked at as a little bit of lens flare-ish feel to it, which I'm also a big fan of lens flare. I'm sorry, I'm a Steven Spielberg, J.J. Abrams fan. Yeah, I love lens flare when it's not distracting from the subject. And so I think that just gives it a really nice soft feel. I think it's the perfect amount of vignetting. Dad, what's your feeling on that?
I totally agree.
Yeah. Very, very nice.
It's very, very sensitive and soft and gentle.
Yeah, especially since you said their family liked white. So you've got, that's going to fit in there very nicely. All right, so right here we're talking about a garage can be great. Overhanging garage doors can be used for interesting portraits. What are we looking at here, Tom?
Well, they actually took the finished portrait and hung it up in the garage. No, I'm just kidding. I did this illustration, and you'll see the portrait alone. I kind of wanted to show you where he was standing. It's a little confusing, but open the garage door, a bunch of junk in there. And at a client's home, I often go to the garage and open the garage door, with their permission, of course, when we're scouting. And they'll say, oh, there's nothing in there. But there might be a wall, a concrete wall with stain. There might be something in there. Oh, he always rides that lawnmower, or she loves to do the. Oh, well, let's use that as a story. Let's maybe use that as a posing aid. So opened this and pulled a few things off the wall, and there were just those not rafters, what do you call them? Runners, whatever they are. 2x4s against the wall, just, the unfinished interior. And I said, so that one I did put a flash behind with a red gel on it because he had red in his shirt to light that background. It was a remote flash that was inside. But I stood him right at the entrance of the doorway so that the open sky was lighting his face. and using a longer lens to kind of compress the background against them. Just something kind of different. They thought it was really neat. They ended up using this as their wall image and also the yearbook. But it was another one of those where when other people who weren't there when we took this saw this, they were like, well, where'd you take that? That's amazing. And I'm like, that's in your garage. They're like, we're kidding. But that was just, he took a couple steps toward the garage opening, and there's the open sky, sun's off somewhere minding its own business, and lit the background with a remote flash. And so if you start thinking ahead of time, because I knew when I saw that, I said, that's kind of an interesting visual. Let's see if we can use that for something. Plus,
now, Tom, that brings up a question. So you said when you saw that, so did you see the garage prior to the day of the portrait session? Did you do a go-see or something where you saw the garage? Or was this something that happened on the day of the portrait session that you discovered that location? Sometimes
it can be one of the above, or each of the above, because sometimes I'll go and you'll see things and make notes, but maybe missed something, or they'll have an outfit on, or they'll tell you something the day of the session and they'll say, well, we didn't mention it, but this spot. So that can it can occur either way. In this case, I think I actually had seen it, and I've used enough garage doors opened up and peeked in. It's like that show where people buy on padlock and they say, what's in the storage unit? They open it up, oh man, it's a new Mercedes, or it's a nothing. So it's always a great surprise, but it's fun because it makes you think, okay. And the other thing is nobody else has that particular portrait. It's different. All their friends didn't come stand in that garage. So everybody's portraits are more personalized to them for multiple reasons, one of which is you're just using a spot that none of their friends would be using for their portrait. So in that one, I can't remember. I think I did a go-see in that particular. If I can, wouldn't do a portrait without doing that with a family. But with seniors, if they're all mine are relatively local, I know where they are most of the time. Anyway, oh yeah, you live over on Thursday. Yeah, I'll drive by and we'll take a peek on Thursday at 3. How's that sign? Just gives me a chance to take a look.
All right, because the reason that I asked was you said, had you not done the red gel, this image wouldn't look nearly as dynamic. You're right. It matches the color in his clothing. It gives it that kind of good power look. It's such a great thing. So did you know you were going to use a red gel? Do you always travel with a red gel in your vehicle just in case of So that's kind of why I was asking if you knew this ahead of time or whether this was something that was born on the day.
That is, I always carry gels with me because once in a while I do gel a flash, not quite as often as, not every day, but I do have gels that pop on. Godox makes some. There's other flash accessories where you can change the color temperature of the flash. And so when I saw what he was wearing, I said, if I put him in there with that flash, so that kind of occurred spontaneously as far as gelling that. I knew I was going to use that location, but I didn't know what he was wearing in that when we first did that particular portrait. So you have to be prepared. And so it doesn't take a lot. I have a case of that has a lot of accessories in it. And I said, I got to get something out of the car. Hold on a second. Because I could have tried to do that without a flash, just left the background dark. But I really wanted to pop and match that shirt.
Yeah, I think that was great instinct because nobody would look at that and think that was taken in a garage.
Right.
That's great use of the space and the available light on that one. So the available light was all on the client, and then you were using auxiliary lighting for the background. So
I will say that the dad jokingly said, "Thanks a lot. My wife saw you using that. Now I have to clean the garage this weekend." I said, I cropped all that out. Leave it alone.
Nice. All right, so here we're looking at a beautiful location here, open sky, sunny or overcast, offers a variety of lighting options. Again, knowing your location, knowing what the light's going to do to it. What do you want to talk about on this one, Tom?
Yeah, when you go to do your scouting, you're always looking for property that has some trees that ultimately, for me, the best time is when the sun is setting behind those trees, so it lights the leaves, gives you a pretty sparkly background that you can throw softly out of focus, creates dimension and depth in the portrait, but also then behind you will be that open sky you're looking for. And how you light them will depend on whether that open sky is overcast, cloudy day, semi-cloudy, as Chuck talked about, that ultimate where the sun is coming over those trees a bit, hitting those clouds and coming back in. That's really the ultimate beautiful light. or if it's just a sunny day and there's just blue sky behind you, but you still have that open sky to work with. So as you're looking for it, this little technique I use, using your hand to help find the best direction of light for the portrait. Sounds simple, and I can't remember where I saw this. Maybe Chuck's taught me everything, so maybe he taught me this too. Chuck has two hands. He probably did this, but it sounds simple, but sometimes, especially if you're just starting, it can be a little bit confusing. Like, where is the good light? I don't know. You just hold your hand up, and I literally took these the other day, and just as I rotate and turn around in different directions, suddenly you'll see it open up. The hand is suddenly lit nice and evenly instead of being in shadow. So the light was kind of behind my hand, even though it was rather soft light. Once I turned my hand enough, I went, right there. That's where I put the person's face pointing. Now, of course, part of that is incumbent upon is the background, what's behind them. So sometimes you find the perfect light and you're like, whoops, well, I can't use that. That's got a bunch of telephone poles or something, but you might be able to position them. So just that simple turning of your hand can really show you, right there's, I went too far. Right there's going to be the spot. And it'll tell you if you can use that spot or not. It's just a real simple technique, but sometimes if I'm just, there it is, and it's a good place to start. This little girl looking off under a tree overhang, so if my hand was in that spot and I turned right about where her face is facing, now she was looking at me, wouldn't have worked. I would have had to use some sort of auxiliary lighting, but as far as I know, as far as I can remember, and this was a very busy session. This was a dentist and his dentist wife, and they have two beautiful little children, and they did the baby plan, and then as they're growing up, they bring them in. So, but they were running around very busy on the property. So she just turned long lens, throw the background out of focus, and the light just falls gently. And I think I had the dad stand over there telling her some good dad jokes. I said, talk to your daughter for a minute. And he's acting silly, and she looked over at him, and this ended up as a Canvas 2020, I think it was. Same thing here, turned her face into the light rather than photographing straight on. As a matter of fact, she's looking over some water. This is at a pond near their property. So we walked around the rocks, and this is a place they always played as kids and fished and kayaked. It was very windy that day. I mean, I'm talking hair straight up in the air. But it was a challenge coming off the water. So her hair is kind of blowing, but it gave that kind of a nice model look. But in this case, the open sky is more to our right. There are kind of trees behind me blocking some of the light, so it does give a little lighting ratio there, but I thought it made a nice little profile.
Yeah, that's really nice. I mean, now I noticed there's a little bit of vignetting potentially on this one, a tiny bit maybe?
Probably a Photoshop. Yeah, I think that was Photoshop vignette.
Yeah, because then you can kind of control where it did, because it doesn't look like, it looks like it's mainly at the bottom, I think, probably.
Yeah, as we talk about, we don't like to cut limbs in half, and preferably I would have preferred she had pants on or something dark, but when she put her hands down like that, her legs showed, and I was like, all right. And we did do some later with full leg, walking and sitting, reclining on the ground. That made more sense, but I just really love this portrait. So I played with various croppings, but I just thought her hands were nice, feminine looking there. So I said I'll vignette the legs a little bit. The real Photoshop guy in me wanted to go in and draw pants on her, but I said that's probably a bit too far. They probably would have noticed. She doesn't own a pair of pants that look like that. Plus,
look at this
funny
guy. Look at this. Oh,
yeah.
That's adorable.
Yeah, this is just open sky in the backyard. You can see way back in the background, the sun is hitting across the street there. This was a road. Behind is the road. And so a little corn stalks, some hay bales up against the fence, just sitting down, and the open sky, late day. I think that was just available light right there. I just saw that spot, and I was like, aha, that's perfect. And so that's I think a 1-year-old portrait. And children move around a lot, so a lot of times auxiliary lighting is not as easy to use. They get up, they run, but you see, oh boy, that's a great spot over there. So if you set up the parameters so okay, we're in a good open sky area here, and there's a lot of sweet spots here, so we can probably keep working even if the child is moving and still get some good light. It's not always perfect, but finding that and seeing that light really helps.
All right, how about this, Tom? On sunny days, make sure the sun is not illuminating the subject directly. We've talked a little bit about that, the harshness of direct light.
Yeah, now ideally when you do your go-see or you do your planning, you try to avoid this all you can. But sometimes there are spots where you're like, the client really wants to work, or you think it's a great spot to do photography, but you have to kind of find at least open shade, and either through auxiliary lighting, reflectors, or some other method, balance that so the background is not so hot in relation to the light falling. In this case, the light coming in from behind me falls on the subjects, and the light behind can be toned down. Now that's the same spot that you just saw, but it was taken on a couple different days. The lighting wasn't quite as hot in the background, and there was a little auxiliary lighting used here. But I guess the point I was going to try to make is just that you can find spots as long as there's a good open a good shade there with a little bit of open sky coming in. Now that we're into the area of natural tree overhangs, where trees are coming in and blocking the light rather than man-made overhangs like a building. We're talking trees. Trees can be your friend, as we saw. And again, this is one where the light's coming in from the way behind the trees, adding that sparkle and depth. And then the open sky is coming in. I think there was just a little bit of off-camera flash to come in. And the thing about ambient light is, there are 3 different modes. There's ambient light by itself, which can be beautiful, but always be prepared with reflectors or off-camera flash, so that if the ambient light just isn't working, you've got those to help you. That's the other part of color balance, is if you're using off-camera flash, it helps you be more consistent. The skin tones are the same every time because you're balanced to that flash, whereas if you're moving around with ambient light, that color temperature can change. You have to be aware of that too.
All right. And then paths with overhanging trees can make great areas to photograph. Again, those overhanging trees like you were just talking about, look for those paths, especially this time of year in Maine and here in Michigan. I mean, look at that. That is beautiful, using the color in the background there, using the overhangs to kind of block any of that light. Do you remember off the top of your head, Tom, was this a day of direct sunlight, or was this overcast? I know you might not remember. I'm not sure, but...
I believe it was a little more overcast. There is so many walking paths around here. A lot of people say, "Oh, we always walk the dogs at the Hart Farms and all these other places." That means something to them. So these overhangs are pretty common, as you mentioned, here in Maine. And so certain times of day, the light comes filtering through. The biggest thing you have to look for is light striking the subject through leaves can cause all the spotting on the face, the hot spots on the face. So you have to really look out for that. I've seen people that, the human brain and the eyes and everything can fool you, so that you're like, this is gorgeous. And then you get the photograph back and you're like, wait a minute, there's white hot spots all over their face. I've seen people do that, and they're like, oh no, how do I Photoshop this out? And I'm like, good luck. So you have to keep looking for that. So those overhangs definitely are well worth it. There's another example of just overhanging tree, natural light blocker. If there's any flash there, it was very minimal, but it should be set up so that the flash, unless you're going for this certain effect, shouldn't have to create necessarily that the lighting is great. The ambient light should be a good base for you to start with, and then the anything else you add in creates that depth and roundness. I do a lot of this, a lot of little ones. This little girl's a doll. She's full of it, just as full of it as this photograph. She and her sister I photographed. I did the parents' senior portraits in their wedding, and then the 2 girls since done families every year for them pretty much. And she just runs around, and her poor mother's like, now you be good. I'm like, no, just let her do what she wants. And she lays down and she's like, how's this? And the light was just perfect. Now, she's turned away a little bit from the open sky, but that's okay. It creates that depth and roundness. And also when lighting, usually we like lighting to come from above because it's more natural looking. You see the catch lights in her eyes from the open sky are actually below the way she laid down. But sometimes you can't ruin the really good to go for the perfect. That expression, that pose, not one parent would ever say to me, I don't like the catch light. It's kind of low. I mean, you could always fix it if you wanted in Photoshop, but I didn't bother. Same thing here. This guy's running around. Light is behind him coming through the trees. And he stopped, and he was very busy. I photographed. We did mom and son portraits for gifts. It was beautiful. The mom was just like a model. It was a great session. But he's just so sweet. He was just standing there and doing his thing. And I said, that's the light we want.
That's right. Sometimes, it's always a balancing act, isn't it? It's always a balancing act of what is the most important thing in this particular moment with what we're working with. And there are times that even with good available light, Off-camera flash is needed. We've been talking about that kind of throughout here. You've seen some examples and heard some examples from Tom of when some off-camera flash was needed to be used. Here's an example right here.
Yeah, you know, you got late daylight, you have open sky behind me, but there was enough coming through the trees. It was kind of hot that we're going to lose her forehead and some of the background to contrasty light. So by setting the camera manually so that we darkened those areas down just a little bit, the off-camera flash came in, and it's a little hotter than I usually have. You can see under her chin on our right, there's a shadow there. I'd probably lighten that up a little bit in a print and under her nose. So, but she was again one of those people with nice features that it wasn't going to be trying to be corrective lighting as much as just be directional and somewhat soft. Same thing here, off-camera flash, softbox coming in from the right, under the overhang of the tree. It's coming in the background. The sun's hitting the trees and the other stuff in the background, but there was enough with the on-camera flash to give that lighting ratio. But without that nice light in the background, that wouldn't have been as successful. Same thing here, big family group, and this little girl, we were doing individual poses, and she came over and rested her hand on the back of a little chair that we were using and just looked up at me, and that I had a handheld available flash, so the available light was beautiful and flat, but the flash came in and just gave her a little sparkle in the eyes. But again, tree overhangs can be your friend. Always look for those tree overhangs. This young man, high school senior, I like when we get lucky enough. You know, they always say luck is, opportunity and preparation come together, create your own luck. You can't just go around, well, I hope I get lucky, because that person might only have, a few hours that day to work with you. And if you get, lucky with lighting the next day, that's not going to help them. So in this case, I knew this time of day, the sun would be about there. I got lucky, quote unquote, and with an off-camera flash to our right, the sun kissing his top of his hair lights worked out great.
All right, and backlit trees, off-camera flash combine a good balance between both subject and background. That is so important. Oftentimes when you're photographing outside by ambient light, you're using that ambient light to light the scene, and then you're using the flash to balance the subject. But as we already saw, there was one example where it was the opposite of that with the young man in the garage with the red gel on the background. But let's take a couple of quick looks at some examples here.
Yeah, and that's that same row of trees, and it is compressed by using a longer lens. The open sky is to our right, his left, but there's also a softbox there to brighten up that lighting a little bit and balance it so that the sun. That was fairly overcast there, so the trees are lit, but the softbox is doing the main or key light there. Again, this was from a family group. This is not a portrait that's going to get me a 99 in some competition, but it got me more than $99. What? Anyways, it was part of a rather substantial family group, and we did all these couples and things. But I wanted consistency. The family group was photographed under this tree overhang. The lighting was nice and beautiful, so I photographed everybody else there. So we did love groupings and any kind of other things. Everything was in harmony. The background, the color, the exposure, everything worked out great. Same thing here. I was looking for posing helpers. In this person's yard, they had this beautiful hammock. Hammocks can be tricky. Sometimes it looks like, what a great place to pose, and people sit on it. And but if you're careful, they have good posture. These two sisters sat down. I was like, now that's gorgeous. And the kind of cabling and the knitting going on in their outfits is emulated a little bit in the look of the ropes that are part of the hammock. But again, under a tree where the hammock was hanging, that light came in from the side. It was beautiful. And then overcast lighting, it can be flat, so therefore sometimes you have to have off-camera flash. The ambient light is just too flat. A lot of times clients will say, what if it's raining? I'm like, overcast is okay. Rain and lightning we don't like. So we'll deal with that when the day comes. Same thing, rather overcast day, little auxiliary lighting. This gentleman returned from the service. His mom was just so proud. They just lost their dad. This portrait is hanging in their home with great honor and was really important to them. And then this family, same thing. We rescheduled like 3 times. It kept raining and they wanted outside near their home, not far up the street from me. And So finally we found a day, but it still was kind of dull and overcast. So I used a little bit of auxiliary lighting. Probably could have popped up a little bit, but they had white shirts, which I didn't really recommend. So too much auxiliary lighting could have washed the shirts out. So it was a bit of a compromise. They love this. The kids are great. We had a great time. So remember, when you go out and you're looking around, you can always see the light, but just start learning how to see it when you arrive at your clients, and be prepared when you get there. And that way your portraits are consistent.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Thank you, Tom. And so, yeah, a lot of stuff to absorb here on the lighting techniques of using ambient light outdoors, finding that light properly. A couple of final thoughts for you to take away today. Take one small step right now on what you discovered today. Take some notes. Maybe you've got a portrait session coming up where you can implement and utilize some of the things that you discovered today. Do that right away while it's still fresh. Remember, successful photographers like you take action and do the things that other photographers won't do, the ones who are struggling and failing. You want to keep upping your game to create the portraits that your target market is going to love. Remember to think differently, but not so differently that you're reinventing the wheel. There's a fine balance there. Tom gave you a lot of things that you can think about today, some that you may have thought of before and have utilized, some things that might be a little bit outside the comfort zone. Experiment with those a little bit. Feel free to think differently and continue to take advice from those who are where you want to be. That's why I want to thank Tom again for being here today, because Tom is certainly where a lot of photographers would like to be, which is, very comfortable, making a very good living, bringing in about $100,000 average per year, every year in his photography business, doing it strictly, through photography, and doing it working, usually less than about 40 hours a week, right around there. That is really enviable. So thank you, Tom, for being here to share everything that you know, as always, and the beautiful portraits that you've created in doing that. And then visit the Photographer's Online Vault regularly. So very important. You have a treasure trove of information right here at your fingertips. Don't forget to go there. Any question you might have or challenge you might be having in your photography business, I'm willing to bet that it is answered somewhere on that online vault, and it's really easy to find using the search bar. So there you go. All right, with that, Dad, I'm going to turn it over to you. For any last minute words you might have for our members as we wrap up seeing the light, the magic of ambient light, how to use it to create perfect portraits. Ed?
Well, I just want to thank Tom for taking all the time, collecting all the different images, working so carefully with Todd to put this whole program together. Beautiful job, Tom. Nicely done. Your work is gorgeous. And to our members, I strongly suggest that you watch this over and over until you know what Tom's going to say before he says it. That way you know it's internalized into your mind, and you can actually start utilizing it on each of your sessions without having to bring notes with you or anything. Great job today, Tom. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Everybody go use this. It's fun. Once you get rolling, you'll have a good time and your clients will be impressed.
Yeah, and you'll really love it when your clients are so impressed that your sales go up because they love what you did and they don't understand the lighting. They don't get it. They're not supposed to, but they love the work and they will tell all their friends. Nicely done today, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, members. Take care, and we will catch you on next month's programs. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.